Good afternoon and welcome to the Lunchtime Series with me, Kevin Britz, leading the charge with insights, information, and ultimately effective results. Joining me today is leadership and coaching segment. She's a mind whisperer. She helps coaches, executives, and speakers conquer their fear of writing to build their legacy. She's a book coach, an author, speaker on storytelling and leadership engagement. Please welcome Kim Vermaak. How are you doing, Kim?
Hi there. I'm very good. And yourself?
Good. Happy New Year and of the season to you. I hope it's a wonderfully successful one, and I'm sure I'll be seeing you quite often this year as well.
Thank you. And thank you for having me on the show.
Kim, so tell us, for those who don't know you, for those who have just met you and are listening, just tell us a little bit more about you, a bit about your background, and what is it that you do?
So I've got quite an extensive background in marketing. In fact, I was in the corporate gifting industry for many years, working with event coordinators and that kind of thing. But I've always been a storyteller at heart. And two significant events happened to the whole country, which really changed the trajectory of my career. The first one was load shedding, and in that time when we had load shedding in South Africa, because of your international guests, that's the time when the lights went out in South Africa, and then they told us it was going to be a regular party that we were going to have in the docks. So with the first one, me, like many other people, we weren't really prepared for what was going to be happening, and my daughter at the time was still in creche. And she had, like many South African children, had a lot of questions that I couldn't answer. When are the lights coming on? What's going to be happening? Why can't I have a hot shower? When can I make a cup of tea? Those kinds of things that are comforting to children. And I didn't have those answers. So what I decided to do was tell her stories. And I would ask her to create two characters, and I would make up a story with whatever characters she came up with. And that was a way of letting her feel a little bit more in control, because she decided who those characters were, and also a way of me comforting her. And all the stories were about heroes and overcoming challenges, so she felt very comfortable in that space. But over time, people started asking me, when are you going to write down your stories? In fact, my husband was that first champion, and I didn't want to do that. And eventually I got challenged by someone to write, and I launched my first book the day before the president announced lockdown for the pandemic. And because I've been in the corporate gifting space, I had clients who paid me deposits to do gifting for them for events. And I had to refund those deposits because we had no events. And you and I are both speakers, so we know what no events means. It means your business is kind of destroyed at that time unless you had the foresight to create something online. But what did happen is that my book royalties came through from my launch. And then every month that I made sales, my Amazon book royalties came in like clockwork on the last day of the month. And I realized that I'd written that book once. And if I continued to market it, whether I became incapacitated or not, I was able to get an income from that. And I then realized the real power of books, that if you treat it like a business, it will pay you like a business. And that is one of my passions, because so many people have a book inside them. They want to write it, but when it doesn't do the sales, they think it's a bad book, and they don't have the courage. They don't know who would want to hear their voice. And that's the space that I'm in, where I encourage people through those fears that I initially had, so that they can write that book.
And, it's beautiful to know that there's a tweak from having a conversation with your daughter and where storytelling originated from, and it just became part of what you do today, right? Kim, so in terms of the mindset whisperer, helping coaches, executives, and speakers conquering their fear of writing to build their legacy, don't you want to give us a bit of an idea of what that is? Because I've written a book and I speak of experience, how very challenging and very scary that position is, because for me it was imposter syndrome, and like who's gonna want to read this book? And I just kept going, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to listen to that and I'm just going to keep going and keep persevering. And the day the book arrived, it was so amazing to just kind of go, wow, I've been speaking about it for 10 years, kind of going, I want to write a book. I don't know what to write about, but I want to write a book. And eventually this book evolved. But speak to us about, what are some of those processes that you take people through? Because I think the fear is really what keeps people from putting it out.
Well, a little interesting story that I read a few years ago is a woman swimming the English Channel. And she was a strong swimmer, but the English Channel is quite misty. So what was happening is she got to a stage she thought, I can't continue. And the support boats came along and they said, please go. You don't have a long way to go. You can actually make it. And so she, no, take me out the water now. I simply cannot make it. And when they got to the shoreline, she became extremely emotional. And they said, why? She said, I could have made it. And they said, why did you ask to be taken out the water if you could have made it? So she said, because I couldn't see the shoreline. And because I couldn't see the shoreline, my voice inside my head was telling me a story that wasn't realistic. And so I bailed on what my goal was. And that happens with a lot of people, whether you're a writer or any kind of dream that you have. You don't always remember what your vision is, or obstacles come in the way and they cloud that vision, and then you want to pull back. So I have two authors in my program at the moment that are going through those challenges. They've written the entire manuscript and then they get to a stage, but why am I even doing this? And that's where a coach really helps you, because one of the things that I do when I start out is I say, well, Kevin, what is it that your vision is? Who are you serving? I get that big picture from them to find out why they actually want to do this. And that's the thing that keeps on spurring them on, because I can pull them back to that vision and say, remember, this is what you decided to do. We do a graphic representation of it. I send it through to them. And, then even at the beginning of the year, when I send through my New Year's messages, I resend them that graphic representation of their vision. The other thing that we struggle with is when we look at a big project, and a book could be anything from 35,000 words to 67,000 words. But let's look at it at the 67,000 words to make it really big. Okay, if you're writing War and Peace or whatever, it's going to be much, much bigger. But 67,000 words sounds like a massive part. When I think about that in the beginning, when I thought about it, it was just way too much. So what we do right in the beginning is we do a speed typing test. It's about a 15-minute speed typing test, and the person can write whatever topic they want to, but I generally would give them a writing prompt. So I've got a book that I launched last year called Escaping the Well of Silence, and it is a 30-day writing prompt challenge where there's a different writing prompt every day. So I would typically take one of those stories out, and I'd say, this is the start of the story. You continue writing in your discipline for 15 minutes, and then we have a hard stop at 15 minutes. Then when we do that, we work out that on average, a person writes about 350 words in 15 minutes. Now, depending on how much time you've got to write, if you multiply that, if you're working every single day for 4 to 5 days a week, at the end of 6 months, you will have 67,000 words. It's actually not such a huge goal. It just feels like it. It's that old thing, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And we do it in little chunks of words until that first manuscript is ready. And then along the way, I will give them reader support. So I'm not an editor. I've got a team of editors that work on the book after the first manuscript is out. But I work on the book in a reader feedback sessions. I would say, Kevin, you said that your uncle had done some amazing thing, but I didn't really see the connection on how you felt about him doing that thing. Or this thing happened to you, but I didn't really I felt like I was outside your head. I wanted to know what was inside your head. So those are the kinds of things that I would say, or I'd say, this doesn't really make sense. It doesn't tie up with what you just said. And then we refine that until we can get to the editor, because an editor doesn't want to have lots of stops along the way. They don't want to, okay, but this doesn't make sense or that doesn't make sense. They just want to make sure that the book sings, but they don't want to have to go through every single rewrite, then send back, rewrite, then send back. So we start getting it editor ready so that you feel stronger.
And, it's beautiful to know that there's a tweak from having a conversation with your daughter and where storytelling originated from, and it just became part of what you do today, right? Can you say that you're a mindset whisperer? How important is it for mindset to support your book journey, writing this legacy piece?
It's incredibly important because we are human beings, we're not machines. And even if you were a machine, you would have times that your laptop might lag a little bit or have some kind of software problems. That's the way machines work. But with our minds, we've got bad days. Just this particular week, I had a misunderstanding with someone, and it made me feel incredibly depressed because I had her say to me she was annoyed about something, and that wasn't my intention at all. I felt hurt by the fact that I could have hurt her because she's, like me, very empathetic of other people, so we feel people's emotions. And in that time when you've got conflict, you might be saying, what am I doing? Why am I even doing this? That kind of reminds me, the convention is coming up for the Professional Speakers Association, and Alan Ray's is going to be speaking. Now, he has helped thousands of businesses scale, do better. But I remember a talk that he gave once where he said there came a time when the cash flow was so low that he wasn't even able to get his child out of hospital. He couldn't even pay the medical bills. He borrowed some money, he got his child out of hospital, and he sat down. I'm not sure if he's still there. But he sat down and he had his child in his, and he said that he actually felt tearful because he was saying, what am I doing to my family? I shouldn't even be in this business. And that was a long time ago. But it shows you that even a person of his kind of vision, that it was asked by the White House to speak about, there's these emotional fluctuations. So when it comes to writing a book, you're going to have that as well. And the challenge, and I think you'll relate to this, when you've achieved some success in your career, you're a CEO, you're a coach, and that kind of thing, and now you're entering into a new place. I'm writing a book. It could go out there to the whole world, and then someone's going to say, this book sucks. You obviously don't know what you're talking about. It's badly written. The grammar is terrible. I have a better theory. You copied this book from someone else. So there's all of those little things. And when the book is out there, then you get exposed. And that is where the imposter syndrome comes in. And that's where a lot of writers struggle. We call it the marathon in the middle. When you're starting out, you're like, yay, I'm so excited. And then there are a couple of things that happen. And then you're like, oh, I can't do this. I want to drop. You become like that woman that was swimming the English channels. I can't do it anymore. And then you become a failure. And who wants to fail? We don't want to feel that way. So that's why mindset is so incredibly important. That you know who you are, where you're going, and you have champions beside you that are going to say, keep going. You can do it.
I love that, yes. And I think it's, like you say, the marathon in the middle. When you feel that it's coming along, it's the consistency that just keep going, keep going, keep going. Kim, you also mentioned, I look at your profile and I see that it's leaving a legacy. Why leave a legacy? I don't know, my legacy is just to be they almost, it's almost like they dumb it down and they kind of go, their legacy is not important. But at the crux of it, I believe personally that everyone has one. Everyone has their own legacy. And if you can have a book to support that too, why not? So, for me, I understand what the legacy would be, but how do you sort of navigate that for people? Because very often people don't even understand why leaving a legacy could matter.
Well, I think it's an incredibly important societal thing. So many years ago, when life was slower, would be sitting down around the campfire, and if you were a parent or any kind of person who was senior, you would tell stories. You would explain things that happened, why crops failed one year, or why a battle was you were victorious. Various different kinds of elements of wisdom we would pass on. Now society has become very, very different. My mother lives in Port Elizabeth. I live here. My stepson lives in Australia. We don't have the opportunity to have community in the way we used to. And some people might disagree with me, but I feel that we've got more access to information at the moment, but less access to wisdom. We're making decisions and choices from a place of overwhelm and not enough slow down, pass on the wisdom. When you are able to pass on the wisdom, when you've got the courage, and I do use the word courage intentionally because it leads to that imposter syndrome, but when you have the courage to pass on what you know within the context that you know it, we become wiser and we can generationally level up. You only really have the influence that you and I have influence of the number of people that are watching this. But when you can take that wisdom and pass it on in a book, you expand that influence of wisdom. You can do it in an entertaining way if you want to, because there's different kinds of readers who are looking for different kinds of teachers, but you basically make the world a better place.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's beautiful to know that there's a tweak from having a conversation with your daughter and where storytelling originated from, and it just became part of what you do today, right? Kim, so in terms of the Mindset Whisperer, helping coaches, executives, and speakers conquering their fear of writing to build their legacy, don't you want to just give us a bit of an idea of what that is, steps that we can take to make this happen?
Before I answer that question, I just want to speak about the executive side. In corporates, there are a lot of CEOs, founders that have built an empire and gone against all odds. And right at the bottom, the people who are coming into the company, they have no idea the challenges that CEO went through, what happened with them, the things they had to overcome, and their wisdom is actually lost and it's filtered down. So I would really challenge many CEOs to, as a first step, to document some of the things that they've gone through. And if you're going to have a meeting with staff, don't just speak about the targets and the vision for the company. Put it down to a level to say, when I started the company, there was this massive thing that happened and I thought I'd never get through it. I know that Jack Welch in his book, he mentions that he blew up the plant and his boss called him in and said, why did you blow up the plant? And he said, well, this is what happened. And he said, what did you learn from it? Don't do it again. I would love to have a boss that if I blew up the plant would say, okay, it's okay. Just tell me what you learned from it. But that is a challenge to see. And that's also one of the first points. Is there wisdom that you have? Are there stories that you have, whether you're a coach, executive, or whatever, that you can pass on to people? And what you would have to say was, what was my vision? What were the obstacles that I had to overcome? What were the steps that I had to take? And what was my emotional reaction to it? I've got a client that wrote a book called Song of the Sandman, and he at one point had a journalist chasing him down the road because two of his partners had done something that they weren't supposed to. And in the book, he says he goes over to the balcony and he looks at the balcony and he thinks, I could actually just throw myself over this balcony. And his friend said, we need to go inside. That's why it's incredibly important to have a tribe, someone that really cares about you. But when you look at his business now, it's valued at, the last time I spoke to him, it was valued at about 200. And it is a multinational company. But that challenge that he went through, he had steps that he had to go through. One of my other clients, Alison Breyer, who wrote Belonging, she had a massive internal fraud in the company. And when we did the book launch, there were people that stood up, more than one, and said, My company is going through exactly the same thing. I was worried that I might have to, file for liquidation. What did you do? How did you get through it? So definitely look at those challenges, start writing them, and understand that your voice matters. There's somewhere in the world, there's someone who's going through the challenge that you've gone through that is going to find comfort in your words.
True. People see an executive and they see the success and they see money and they see power very often, but they don't see the backstory. And I think from that position, it's so important for executives to share that, because very often, that's why so often you find coaches who've transitioned from a corporate to a coaching perspective based on the fact that they have been through the mill. They've got the t-shirt kind of thing, right? So those 3 steps, what would be the first 3 steps that we take to start this journey and start getting on board with writing our legacies?
So one of the first things that I do when a client comes to me is that we discover who we are writing for. That's incredibly important, because there's no point in saying, okay, I'm writing a story about my life. That's all very nice, but is there someone who's going to be benefiting from the difficulties that you've gone through? So identify who that person is and be very specific. Some people say, oh, it's just anyone who's running a business. Well, no, maybe not. Maybe it's one of my clients. Currently, we worked this down. He said he is writing for men who are either 40 or 50 and post. So then discover who it is. Then start writing your story and all of the different stories that you have. And then you can filter them. You can say, this story is nice and anecdotal, but maybe it's more geared towards mothers in comparison to executives. And then we sift those ones that are going to have relevance for our target audience. And then obviously you have to just write the book. Then you have to have someone who is going to edit it. Not your auntie or your English professor. Some people say, I'm sending it to my high school teacher. No. English professors, high school teachers, those are people that are geared towards finding fault in your work. An editor does those things, but they also look at what's going to be commercially viable, and they're going to be looking at on what sells well. So get yourself a professional editor and a professional cover designer. So companies like I have, Write, Learn and Earn, we offer a full service. We do the cover, we do the editing, we do all of that. But you don't necessarily have to go with a one-stop shop. You can pick and choose. I would also say decide if you're going to be traditionally published or if you're going to be independently published. There are different pros and cons for each of them. With independent publishing, you are an entrepreneur. You have to cover all of the costs, and you've got to get service providers that will support you. But then the royalties are yours. They're 100% yours, unless you're going to be selling in bookstores and you've got a distributor, but you are the entrepreneur, and that means you run it like a business. If you're going to go traditional publishing, you've got to apply to places that would take your kind of book. The risk element is different. They cover the costs. If you're getting someone who wants to, you get these publishers who are charging you for everything, but they take your distribution rights away from you, don't do that. A proper traditional publisher will do the distribution rights, but then they cover all of the costs, and you then would get whatever percentage royalty is agreed upon. There is a lower risk for you, but those traditional publishers have got good inroads into the bookstores or distributors. You're just going to make less money.
There we go. So I love that, Kim. Thank you. And so I love the second step, just write those stories, get it. Kim, if we want to get hold of you, what's going to be the quickest way to do that?
Okay, so I am on LinkedIn fairly frequently, so you'll find me on LinkedIn. And then I've got a website, writelearnandearn.co.za. On there, you can actually book a free 30-minute discovery call with me where we chat a little bit about your book and your vision and what you're wanting to achieve. And then I've also got the Write, Learn and Earn with Kim show on YouTube, where I interview authors that we can learn a little bit about them, what their processes are, and that's really going to help you. Coincidentally, I've got on that show, I've actually got a book publicist that we work with quite frequently, who explains to you some of the steps that you need to go through in terms of publicity to get your book into traditional bookstores.
Fantastic. I love that. Right, so all the information and links will be in the description box below. She's the mindset whisperer, helping coaches, executives, and speakers conquer their fear of writing. Kim Vermaak, thank you so much for spending some time with us. And yeah, we look forward to hearing more from you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me on the show, and you have a fantastic year.
And you. Thank you so much. Thanks. Cheers for now.